This is the railway station at Iłowo Osada in Poland. It may not look like much today. The railway station itself has no personnel. If you want to buy a ticket, then you're going to have to do it on the train, or if there's a machine here. But the station has been unmanned now for a number of years. But would you believe that this railway station in a small town today, the population about 2,800, something like this, but when this railway station was initially built, the population was no more than 500, and this became a major starting point for many people for life in the New World. Around 500,000 people passed through here, leaving Russia and on their way to America. This station was the first point in what was then Germany and Prussia. The Russian border in Poland was a couple of kilometers down the line, so this is where people came to. And because of the amount of emigrants passing through, the station itself, actually this dates largely to what we see now to 1895. The railway line's been here since 1877, and there were 5 crossing places for emigrants from Russia into Germany and 7 from Russia into Austria. Now, people passing through here in 1904, the German government decreed that emigrants in transit had to only use German ports, so that's to say Bremen or Hamburg. Those that were going to say Antwerp or Rotterdam had to pass through Austria in a very roundabout way. So you go from Austria, then you go into Switzerland, then into France, and that would be a rather expensive option because of that, because of the price and everything. This made things very difficult for new immigrants to the United States above all, but also to other countries such as Argentina. Let's go and have a look down at the station. Before the First World War, if you wanted to actually travel, it was pretty good. You didn't need documents. Well, there was one country that needed documents, and the bad news is that's the country most people wanted to leave. That was Russia. If you wanted to leave Russia, in order to get a passport and permission to leave, you needed 3 things. If you were a young man, you needed papers from the army, which stated that the army's given you permission to leave. It either wasn't interested in you or you'd done your military service. You needed a document from the police which said you weren't wanted for anything, and you also needed ID documents. And you can see, in a highly corrupt society, this could be a rather expensive thing to actually obtain. The result of this was, of course, that people often didn't have any documents at all. Come back on to that subject. So, how would this affect people who left? Now, if we look at emigration from Europe to the United States, there is marked differences between groups. Now, for example, if we take Italians, or even for that matter, non-Jewish Poles, as examples, then it was largely young men would go abroad. They'd try and make their fortune in the new world, save up enough money for their families to come over with them. They'd send them the money, a ticket, and then the family would come over. That was largely the sort of thing that happened. In the case of Jews, it was different. Jews largely travelled as a family group. Research, which has been done, it's difficult to actually say who was Jewish and who wasn't Jewish, because in the United States they marked your country of origin. So it could be either Italy or Russia or Austria or whatever. But that research has been done, and this suggests the following: that of immigrants into the United States, 44% who were Jewish were adult female. 25% were children, that's to say up to 14. The rest obviously adult male. So more adult females than adult males. For adult females, for example, from Poland or from Italy, to take an example, is much less than that. Adult females from Poland, I think, was 33, and from Italy, it's not much greater than 1/5. So, if, however, you were travelling as a single male and you try to get documents, that would be extremely difficult to get the paperwork for the rest of your family later. But as with Jewish people, they were leaving because of the persecution, the pogroms, and hoping to build a new life in a new world. So that was the reason for that. They weren't going to make a living, they were going to stay alive. Very important difference there. Right, so just have a quick look at what else we've got here. We've got this tower. Now, Iłowo, at the end of World War I, was transferred to Poland, precisely because of this railway line. Later, I'm going to do a video on the plebiscite in East Prussia, where people could choose if they wanted to become part of Poland or East Prussia, because they weren't given the choice of Germany. It was Poland or East Prussia. So I'm going to look at that. But people who lived here, this was automatically transferred to Poland precisely because of this line here. And the border was moved further north. In 1920, this area here was actually captured by the Bolshevik forces. In the Second World War, this area here was occupied on the 2nd of September 1939, the second day of the conflict, and the building which we've got there became part of the Soldau concentration camp. I'll do a separate video on that one. And here we've got a train. Although the train actually isn't as old as you might think. This is a Type 45 train, so it was built from 1946. Two factories produced them, one in Poznan and the other in Szranów near Katowice. And this was used above all for the transport of coal, initially anyway, coal and iron ore from the south of Poland to the ports. Later was used for other things. A total of 420 of these were produced. So there's one here, there's one Ostrów Wielkopolski, I think there's one in Dąbrowa Górnicza, although I'm not certain. Around 1892, there was an outbreak of cholera in Hamburg, and the authorities, more or less naturally I suppose, decided that the immigrants that were passing through had something to do with it. And indeed Robert Koch, who went on to win a Nobel Prize, investigated it, and he thought it came from the immigrants as well. As it happened, the outbreak of cholera was eventually traced to 6 French seamen. As a result of this outbreak, German authorities decided that they weren't so keen on their country being used as a transit country, but because of the huge amount of money that was involved in the emigrant business, the shipping lines strongly lobbied to have something done about it, to have controls put at the border to check that the health of the emigrants, or immigrants, depending which way you're looking at it, was okay. And what they did was they built, and the 5 transit points in Germany, places where the health could be checked of those emigrants who were passing through. And one was built here at Iłowo. And at this point, whereas there were controls, the people who came here had to actually pay for the control. They were looking above all for skin diseases. Now let's bear in mind, if somebody got to the United States, was found to have a disease, it was up to the shipping company to pay for them to return. As it is today with all sorts of, shall we say, people who don't have visas and things like that. It's the airline that has to pay for them to actually come back. So there was an initial screening was done here at Iłowo, at the other points of entry. There was a major check was done at the port itself, so either Bremen or Hamburg, and the checks at Ellis Island, of course, are well known. Now, the conditions here, though, were said to be really bad. So once they'd gone through the initial check, they weren't allowed out until there was a train ready, suitable to carry them. There was one place to eat, but obviously the prices were pretty expensive. People were squashed into very small areas, and sometimes waiting for that train to leave could take a very long time. Furthermore, the shipping lines tried to make use of the fact that people were sort of in a captive audience. They tried either to upgrade their tickets or to sell them tickets just to use their lines. Furthermore, there's many emigrants up until that time had actually used British lines, so either going to Hull or to Liverpool, or to Hull and transiting through the UK to Liverpool. They tried to get them to buy tickets that would take them all the way through to the final destination, normally being New York. And they would use, it would seem from the accounts, quite strong-arm tactics to actually get them to do that. One account I read was of a family, and they want the shipping line trying to get them to upgrade from 3rd class to 2nd class, and saying without that they couldn't move on. Sort of typical sort of strong-arm sales tactics. I think most of us have actually heard, and this would have taken them more money than they actually possessed to have actually done such a thing. Bear in mind, as far as food was concerned, particularly the Jewish people, they didn't know if the food was kosher or not, or they just quite rightly suspected it wasn't kosher. They continued to eat them, whatever potatoes and herring they might have actually brought with them through this long journey that they had taken. Now, as far as I can see, there's nothing left now of the sanitation epidemiological station that once stood here. I stand to be corrected. Maybe there are buildings which are still in existence. As I said, there were less than 500 people living here at the time the railway came here in 1877. But with all the people passing through, the work associated with customs and all the rest of it, new housing was needed, and these houses were built. As a result, we can see these in old postcards, and one slight difference is that in the postcards they've got gardens in front of the buildings. But it's very nice to see that this has actually survived. And I'm going to show you this building here as well, because this I find quite fascinating, in as much as that this building was part of the concentration camp, as I said. It was later a school, and I'd understood that this building had fallen to ruin. Well, it's been converted into flats, and I know that might seem bad for most people, but the way I look at it, it's survived. The building has survived thanks to finding a modern day use for it. And as somebody who's a historian, at the same time I used to work in real estate, and for me that building is in that condition today is something which is quite outstanding. We can see at there's a sign to record what happened here during World War II, and furthermore there's also another stone which records the events of that time as well. Just walk over the other side of the road and show it to you. So this stone is in memory of the people, both children and adults, who were killed by the Nazi camp that operated here until 1945. So this sign says that this was the location of the transit camp, and it's there to remember those who were held here from 1941 until 1945.